How does one move forward after losing a spouse or a loved one? Is there a formula that's a one-size-fits-all to heal from loss? Can we learn and prepare for the inevitable? Hello and welcome to the June edition of the Author Showcase, a virtual experience, a marketing program for members of the South Florida Writers Association on YouTube. My name is Evelyn Benson, and I'm the host and producer of this program. Thank you for watching us tonight. If you haven't done so, please hit the subscribe button to be notified of our future videos, or better yet, join the South Florida Writers Association, a nonprofit organization, and support this online marketing platform for authors to promote their books or for you, the public, to learn from the topics discussed and share tips of the writing process. Visit our website, www.southfloridawriters.org, for more information. Folks, tonight I am honored to introduce our featured author, Arlene Sacks, discussing her best-selling book, Moving Forward, The Widow's Journey. Shortlisted for the 2022 Selfies Autobiography Memoir Award. This book tells Arlene's journey of loss, grief, healing, and moving forward after the illness and death of her beloved spouse, Howard, of 47 years. It shares the stories of 13 other widows from diverse cultures. Dr. Sacks is more than qualified to speak about the topic, which is not only a widow, but she also studied education and psychology during her undergraduate and master's degree studies. In her doctoral studies, she focused on education and behavioral psychology as a student of B.F. Skinner's daughter. She served as director of graduate programs at St. Thomas University and Barry University in Miami. She has been dean of doctoral programs and also served as associate vice president of academic affairs at Union Institute and University. So folks, let's put our hands together for Dr. Arlene Sacks.
Welcome and thank you for joining me in order to learn about my book, Moving Forward, The Widow's Journey. And although it is written for widows, it has impacted men as well. Some men who were widowers and some men who wanted to, after reading the book, help their wives prepare through an important discussion. So although it is predominantly about and for women, it has great impact for some men who have contacted me about it. Now, what happens is when I go to a bookstore or a library or on Amazon, which I am on and I'm grateful for, when I do that, I always look at the title, and then if there's a subtitle, and in my case, a bunch of rocks going up, I always look and wonder, how did the people who wrote the book or published the book ever decide on that? And so when I was doing this, I went back to think about what impacted me, what made me do this. And since many of you are writers, you would also be wondering about how you do that when you're picking a cover. And how it happened was I had worked for many, many years until this past June on an online university, which means that people are dispersed all over the United States. And the university brought us in 3 or 4 times a year where we could gather as faculty, administrators, leaders, and have meetings for about 4 or 5 days from the morning to the evening, working hard. But at dinner time, everything stopped because we really were spent. And your choices at dinner were whether to meet people with whom you worked online but never really sat down and had cafe with, or whether you wanted to be with a group who you knew, or whether you just wanted to go up to your room, very spent, and hit the clicker, watch television. So I did have a number of people I would see, but most of the time I really wanted to go to my room. I will tell you, though, I had a lovely colleague, a spiritual gentleman, a sensitive gentleman, someone who meditated and cared about people and was in healthcare. In any case, he called me a couple of months after my husband died and said, Arlene, I would like to have some dinners with you. I think it would be good for us to visit. And we did that several times over that first year. About a year and a half after that, he said to me, I would really like to go to dinner this time and have a specific conversation. And I said, okay. And he said, there are 2 things I want to discuss with you. And I said, okay, fine. And we went to a lovely restaurant to have our dinner. And he ordered the appetizers, and we had an appetizer. And at that point, he said, I want to discuss with you 2 things that have been on my, meaning his, mind. One of which was that it might be time for me to move on. And the other thing was for me to possibly think about selling my house, which was large. It's a lot of work. It needs renovations, older homes. And he was really being helpful. And people don't realize, but 2 of the things you really can never say, although people do, they're thoughtful, they mean well, is to think that a widow won't realize when it's time, if ever, for her to move on. And she certainly understands what her house is, and she will know when it's time to move, be the reason economic, whatever. So he said to me, I want you to think about this. And a number of people said, and they don't realize this is not what you say to a widow. We are not silly. We really understand what's going on in our lives. So when they brought the salad, the second serving, which means now twice, he said, I want you to really think about moving on and maybe selling your house. And again, I was very polite. I said, thank you. But the third time he said it was when we ordered meat and we shared it. And when you go to a nice restaurant, they give you a very nice steak knife. And the steak knife usually has a thick wooden handle and a very nice serrated edge. And I looked at the steak knife and I'm like baseball, 3 strikes and you're out. So now it's the third time he's telling me this. And I said, this doesn't gel well with me. And I got a bit nervous. And I don't know what happened, but I picked up that steak knife and I held it up and I said, I realize you're trying to help me, but if you mentioned me moving on, which for me meant leaving my husband somewhere behind, or selling my house, which has my memories and my history, I said, I'm going to lunge across this table with the steak knife. And he just looked at me and there was dead silence, pardon the pun. And if you ever have dinner with somebody and there's silence for about a minute and a half, you don't realize how long that time is. But he finally said to me after about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, Arlene, maybe you can never move on, but I'll bet you can move forward. And with that, it was just like electricity going through my body. I went, move forward? I know how to do that. I've done that my whole life. So when you look at where the title came from on my book, it'll say moving forward because I just resonated with that. And then, of course, editors had said to me, you really have to put something about this is the widow's journey, your journey, and I will explain the journey of others. And because moving forward is a very catch-all phrase. So the widow's journey helped. And of course, the rocks show that I walked across them and moved forward. But anyway, I thought since so many of you might be writers, you would be interested in that piece. And I ought to share how this book came about. This book came about because approximately 3 months after my husband Howard died, the president of the university called me and said, I know that everyone's coming in for meetings. I'm hoping you'll be there. And I said, certainly. His name is Dr. Roger Sublette. And so he said, he and his wife, Cindy, would like to take me to brunch when I come in. Well, first of all, he's the president of the university inviting me to lunch. Of course, I'm going to go to brunch. Of course, I'm going to go. However, in effect, Howard and I had dined with these people several times. They were lovely, thoughtful, very warm when we came in. So, of course, I looked up and was happy to go to lunch, excuse me. And when we had that meal, I got an opportunity to tell stories with them who cared about me and my husband that, Howard had done a lot of extraordinary things for me in the last 9 months before he died. And so I shared that with them. We had a nice brunch, lunch, and off we go. He said, okay, now I'll take you back to your hotel. And in the car, he said to me, Arlene, when you go home, you ought to just take a piece of paper, because they all knew I was a big legal yellow pad writer with pen. Even my books are written in yellow pad with pen. And he said, you ought to just dot point or bullet point the things that Howard did for you in those last 9 months. He said, because you won't remember them. You don't have to write a paragraph. You don't have to write lines. You don't have to do anything, but just jot these down, which I had no intention of doing. But when he said it, I remembered it. And when I got home, I did that. I wrote it down and I put it on a yellow piece of paper and put it on the top of my desk. And I did not touch it for 5 years. And so, okay, I had it, but I would like to share with you what it's like. And I write this quite in the beginning of my book. And what it's like for a widow, it's almost like you're on a train ride. So I'm going to share that with you. The best way I can describe the process of moving forward after losing someone so close to you is by comparing the process to a train ride. When you envision a train, you can picture a long line of separate compartments. Life moves forward from the last compartment to the first. As you progress, you slowly move from one car to the next, eventually shutting the door to the previous compartment and becoming content in the next one, until it's time to move to the next compartment. And that involves letting go of one door and stretching for the next. Now, it actually shakes you in every piece of you because you're going to move forward, but it's just like when you're on a train and you are on that platform and the platform is shaking when you're moving from one compartment to the next, then it shakes. It's just like that in real life. When you're moving from one to another, it's shaking you. It's just a very difficult experience. And sometimes it can feel like you've moved from one compartment to another without any problem. Mostly you are trembling across the unknown. When I lost the love of my life, I was keenly aware of every single moment and every movement. Often as if it were in slow motion, I chose to open the door and reach for the next compartment, still seeing the compartment behind me, but moving forward to the next one on my own. I find comfort in knowing I can always look back to see and remember everything inside of the lower compartments, while I also know there is so much more to do in the one I am in now. And that's basically how you move forward, understanding what it's like. And another wonderful experience I had doing this book, and again, as writers, you may have had this experience, you may not. One thing you learn is if you're willing to talk to people and they respond to you, there's such a wealth of experiences that there's never enough. So what happened was, actually, it was kind of comical in the beginning, because the beginning of my book deals with my journey. So all about what my journey was like and what my husband did for me to help me through it, because he knew he was not going to live. The second part of my book deals with all the unbelievably supportive, wonderful people who assisted me. And I could not have done this. You know, when they say, you don't do it alone, I did not. I had a lot of wonderful support. But the third part deals with 13 other widows. And I'm going to explain how they came to me, because, again, that's why I really believe this book had a life of its own. I'm just the messenger, even though I wrote it. So my hairdresser, Guy, because I dye my hair, and for anyone who dyes their hair, they know that you sit for 32 minutes with dye dumped on your head. And my hairdresser either would go to the next client or sit with me and chit chat. And he knew all about the book, and he knew what I was doing, and he knew all my experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And he said to me at the end of one of these sessions, he said, you know, Arlene, I have two other widows in the community. One lives close to me, one lives further away, but you should speak with them, because they also stayed in their home, they repaired, and they moved forward. And I looked at him and I said, you want me to call two strangers I do not know and say, hello, my name is Arlene Sacks, and I'm a widow and you're a widow, and we should chat? I said, these people are going to think I'm insane. So he laughed and he said, no, no, I'll call them. And then if they wish to speak to you or meet with you, I'll let you know. I said, well, thank you. He did, they did. And we met for lunch separately. I went to near where they lived. And it ended up being 4 different conversations. Some people would call these interviews. They were not really, they were conversations. Because the truth is, widows wear the same shoes. We're completely different. We have different journeys. But there are things I can say to them that no one else can, other than someone, again, who wears these shoes. So I would tell some people, friends with whom I would either be walking or having a meal, I would say, you know, I interviewed these 2 women, blah, blah, blah. And another friend of mine is African American. And she said, what's the ethnicity of these women, Arlene? I said, well, I believe one's Christian and one's Jewish, but I never thought about it. She said, well, I have a friend who's African American, and she's a widow, and you should speak with her. As a matter of fact, she's 32, and she had young children upon becoming a widow, and you should speak with her. And I said, fine. And I told her exactly what I told Guy, and she said, oh, I'll call her, and then I'll let you know. The woman wanted to speak with me, and we had also 4 meetings, wonderful conversations. Then I have another friend who's Asian, and she said, you know, Arlene, you don't have an Asian, and you should talk to somebody who's Asian. And I have a friend who's Japanese, and she's 82. So I said, okay, great. She did the same thing. Then I have another friend who's Portuguese, and I traveled with her to Portugal. And while sitting, I had about 8 pages written, because now it's a few years into this writing. And she said, well, I think that you might be interested in speaking to my cousin who's Portuguese but lives in Paris. And since we're in Portugal, I will call her. It's the same time zone. And she did, and the woman spoke to me, and now I'm interviewing somebody over the pond, because the rest of the conversations were done long distance. And this went on, and people just brought other people to me. And they were different ages, different stages. Some had young children, some had teenagers, some had adult children, some had no children. Some of these widows, as I said, were different ethnic backgrounds. Some of these widows, one woman was a widow twice. And a neighbor of mine who's gay said, you know, Arlene, gay women get married. And we have, you know, we are widows, and I have a friend, and now you know the end of the story. So this is what went on. So you just never know, you never ever know where the source is coming from. And I will also share with you that what happens also through this experience, and I write about it, is that one has to make choices in life. Choices you never made before because you had a spouse or a partner. So I had to make choices which then led to decisions throughout this experience, and of course continues. But for some reason, and I cannot tell you why, and I do not know why, I decided immediately, based on 3 choices, to make 3 decisions. And the first year after Howard died, I made 3 decisions about my personal behavior that I believe helped me move forward. I did not plan them, they just evolved from my innermost feelings. They were to wear only black, not listen to music, and not dance. How or why, I cannot explain, but I will share how they worked out. Wearing black is a traditional expression of mourning in many cultures, including our own, though American widows today tend not to adhere to such rigorous customs. I decided this discipline suited me and immediately moved the rest of my clothes out of my closet. For 1 year, I would focus my energies on getting through each day and maintaining my emotional stability, not on what I would be wearing or what might match. What I soon discovered was that this choice not only freed me from issues of fashion, appearance, impression, it also set me on a path of simplicity. It became easier to move through the day, especially that first year, and at the day's end, drop my simple clothes into the laundry basket, take a hot shower, and crawl into bed. When the next day arrived, simplicity prevailed once more. Year 1 went by in this fashion or lack of it. No music, my second choice. Whatever era we come of age in my case, it was the 60s. We all remembered beloved music and lyrics of the day. What's more, throughout the course of a long relationship, certain songs accrue special meaning. Music has a way of evoking memories, moments, and firsts as nothing else can, and producing what's known as a frisson, a French word that really means a shiver, akin to an electric current. I knew that getting through all of the milestones of year 1, birthdays, anniversaries, and such would be difficult. I decided it might be easier to weather those occasions without the additional associations and feelings called up by the music that became meaningful to Howard and to me. One of these songs was Yes, I'm Ready by Barbara Mason. Another was My Cup Runneth Over by Ed Ames. Add to those the romantic strains of Johnny Mathis, Roberta Flack, and the rest of the romantic slow dance music of those years. Also operatic arias, Broadway show tunes, even Hallmark commercial jingles could set off a flood of feelings inside me. So I made a conscious effort to avoid this stimulus in year 1, knowing that eventually these songs would provide comfort rather than pain. And the last choice I made was no dancing. Remembering that shared feeling, the closeness, the touch can be overwhelming. I had often described life with Howard as a dance. So when that dance ended, it made sense for me to take a break from literal dancing. Again, this left me more able to focus on what I needed to accomplish. It also offered me an excuse for declining interviews to parties and gatherings, which spared me the experience of sitting at a table while the music and other couples spun around me. not attending parties was a beneficial result of my moratorium on music and dancing. My choices fit together and they fit me. And another thing that occurs that I speak about in the book is really concepts that you develop. You think about things, you go through things, and then somehow you develop a concept that helps you live. I also, and I won't go into it here, speak about firsts, the challenges of the first travel, the first dinners you have for people, all those firsts that you have to begin again. But it's mostly the concepts that sort of carry you through. And one of the concepts I came to understand was being almost happy. And what's unique about that is I developed this concept, I thought about it, and I'll read you 2 paragraphs about it. But the widows with whom I spoke and had conversations, after we finished, and the book was on Amazon, they then contacted me, which I made it a point of speaking with them after the conversations because I didn't want the book to be published, and they thought, well, she forgot about me. So about every 3 or 4 months, I called everybody. I devoted a week once every 3 or 4 months to make sure I spoke with everybody because I so appreciated my sister widows. So one of the concepts was almost happy. 5 years after Howard's death, I began to feel happiness again, within limits. I guess you could say I was almost happy. The return of joy surprised me, but I knew it was real. At times, I'd catch myself singing or whistling around the house, but then something would remind me of Howard, and I'd fall back into sad reverie. I came to understand that being almost happy was a balancing act that would probably continue for a very long time. I decided that being almost happy might be good enough. It wasn't really so bad to dwell in a peaceful state when I was fully able to enjoy a moment, a day, an experience. So what if clouds loomed on the horizon? This is part of moving forward and through the world, something I am very proud I am able to do. And keeping that in mind, there are some other concepts I discussed, but almost happy was something that resonated with all the women. I would like to end with just a paragraph, which I write at the end of my book, and really it's part of what I'm saying to you today. It has taken me a long time to gain the perspective necessary to write moving forward. Remember, I didn't write it for 5 years. But that has been part of my journey too. I am so much stronger and more capable now than I was a few years ago. The view ahead has grown so much clearer, while looking back has become easier and less fraught with grief. I've gained valuable skills, made new connections, and begun defining my life as it is rather than as it was. Perhaps it seems presumptuous, but I believe you can do all of this too, sooner or later. In my case, it was later. Widowhood is many things, but it is not a process that ends. It's life, and life is an open-ended journey. I thank you for sharing a bit of this journey with me. I write that in the book, but I really want to thank you so much for sharing this journey with me and giving me your time, because there is nothing more precious than time. And I invite you to read the book. I invite you to learn about my book. It's on Amazon. It's at Books and Books, on some of the Books and Books or independent bookstores. It's in the library. But I invite you to read it. And most importantly, if you know someone this might help, that is my absolute mission, to help other widows and sometimes widowers as well move forward. It is with absolute gratitude that I thank you for spending the time with me.